Yo, what's up? This is Norris and we're here with another sew along. Today we're going to be using a men's simplicity pattern, 8615 by Mimi G Style. Let's get started. Today we're going to be working on view B, the overalls. So if you're new to sewing, I need a refresher. Watch the sewing basics video, linked in the description box below. Okay, once again we're going to be using pattern 8615 and we're working on view B, which are the overalls. This is a reissued vintage pattern, so I'm going to show you how to slim the leg down that you see on the pattern cover, not in the pattern piece. So on the back, you have your notions. For a B, you're going to need a 9-inch zipper. It says you need bias tape. I'm not going to be using that. I'm going to be serging all my insides. You're going to need 4 5/8 of an inch buttons, which are denim buttons. And last, you'll need 1 pair of 1 3/4 of an inch overall buckles. Also on the back of the pattern cover, you're going to see options for fabric, and my option will be denim. So now we'll go through all the pattern pieces used for this particular view. The first one is pattern piece number 20, which is the back facing. You're going to cut 2. Pattern piece number 19, which are the suspenders, and you're going to cut 4. Pattern piece 13, which is the underlap, you're going to cut 1. Pattern piece 18, which is the left back pocket, and you're going to cut 2. Pattern piece 14, which is the pocket, you're going to cut 4. Pattern piece 16, which is the bib pocket, you're going to cut 2. Pattern piece 15, which is the bib, you're going to cut 2 of these as well. Pattern piece 17, which is the back, you're going to cut 2. And last but not least, pattern piece number 12, and you're going to cut 2, which is the front. Okay, so to slim your pant leg for your front and back pieces, you're going to use a pair of pants. So just lay it on top of your pattern, and you want to match up the crotch. And starting from the crotch on the pattern piece, you're just going to grade however much you need all the way down to the hem. Also leave 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. And you're also going to do that for the other side. So start at the crotch line, and you're going to do the same thing. Grade all the way down, however much you need, all the way down to the end of the hem. And you're going to do this, like I said, for the front and back pieces. Okay, so once you cut all your pattern pieces out of fabric, we can begin pinning and sewing. Okay, so we're going to start with our front 2 pieces. And I went ahead and serged along the inside of both of my pieces on the inseam. And I also stay stitched from the center to the dot and then down 2 inches, all within a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. And I did this for both of my fronts. Next, we're going to apply the zipper. But before I get started, we're going to be using a modified version of what you see in the instructions. So what I want you to do is, we're right sides facing, place both of your front pieces on each other. And you're going to pin. Pin right here at the crotch. And also pin all the way out. So once we get to the sewing machine, we're going to use a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, starting here at the crotch, and we're going to use a regular stitch all the way up until we get to the dot. So we're going to break the stitch, and we're going to start using a basting stitch all the way up. So what I like to do is create a little guideline from the dot all the way up. This is to keep me straight. So once you do that, you can head to the sewing machine. Okay, so once you stitch your 2 fronts together, you want to take your scissors and clip right up to that dot. Be sure don't clip into your stitch. There you go. And you also can clip here, just like that. So now we're going to attach the zipper. So you want to pull everything to one side except for the right flap. So you want to grab your zipper tape and make sure it's facing down. And you want the edge of your zipper tape right there where the seam is. And also be sure to have it 5/8 of an inch below. So we're just going to stitch using a basting stitch for the right side. Okay, so I switched my zipper foot, and I'm just gonna baste the right side down. Back to the end. Okay, so next I'm going to turn this around just like this, and we're going to sew right next to the edge. So I'm going to move my zipper foot over. So I'm going to start at the very top and stitch close to the edge. Okay, so once we stitch this side down, you want to flip your zipper tape over, and where it naturally lays, we're going to stitch along the edge. So I'm going to switch my zipper foot back over and starting from the edge. Okay, so once we finish up the inside right here, you want to turn it around, and we're going to do some top stitching. So be sure to have this placed on the right side, and we're going to catch all of this when we top stitch. Before we do that, we're going to make a little guide. So measure down 9 inches from the top and make a little mark, and also measure 1.5 inches width from the top. And this right here is just going to be a guideline for us to follow when we top stitch. Just like this. So head over to your sewing machine, and you're going to do a top stitching starting here, around the curve, and all the way out. Okay, so once you do your top stitching, you want to take your seam ripper and just take out your basting stitches. Okay, you're just gonna open up your zipper, and we're gonna attach the underlap. So what you're gonna do is take this over to your ironing board, press it, and then serge the end, and then we're gonna attach it to our flap. Okay, so I went ahead and serged the bottom and also the open edge of my underflap. And now what we're going to do is attach it right behind the zipper right here. And we're going to top stitch it down on this side of the zipper tape. Okay, once we're finished attaching our underlap, we want to put this to the side, and next we're going to work on our pockets. So what you want to do is go ahead and press under 1/4 inch like I did right here at the top, and we're going to turn it around, and we're going to turn it over and fold at the fold line. Once you press at the fold line, we're going to stitch all the way around using 5/8 of an inseam allowance, and at our corners we're going to do 1 row of basting stitches just to help turn the corners just a little bit more. Okay, so now we're going to trim the corners up top. So a little bit right there to about 1/4 inch, and then all the way up to the top. Same thing on the other side. Then we're going to turn it over to the right side. Press out your corners. And at the bottom, you want to take your basting stitches and just pull a little bit just to get a better turn, like that. And then the same thing on the other side. So you want to take this over to your ironing board and give it a good press, and we're going to do some top stitching. Okay, so once you give it a good press, we're going to do some top stitching. So what you want to do is measure down 2 3/8 of an inch and make a little guide. So we're going to top stitch along this guide, and then we're going to move up 1/4 inch and do another row of top stitching. Okay, so once you do your 2 rows of top stitching, we're going to attach them to the pants. So grab your front, and you should have 2 dots and also a guide to put your pocket. So place them there. We're going to pin it down. Okay, so head over to your machine and we're going to top stitch on the edge all the way around to the other end, and then we're going to move in 1/4 inch and do the exact same thing. Okay, so once you attach one pocket, you want to do your other pocket the same exact way. And also, before we move along, you want to take your tabs that are attached to your front and fold in 1/4 inch and stitch it down, and then also fold it at the fold line and baste it across the top. Okay, so once you top stitch both of your pockets down, we're going to move along to the bib. So on one of your bibs, you want to fold the bottom up 5/8 of an inch, and we're going to trim it down to 3/8 of an inch. Okay, so once you trim that down, you want to put them right sides facing and pin. Okay, so once you pin it, we're going to stitch using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, starting from one end all the way around. You're going to pivot, go across the top, pivot one more time, and then finish up down here at the bottom. Once you do that, come back and we're going to continue. Okay, once you're stitched all the way around, you want to trim the corners just like that. And then also a little bit more. And then we're going to turn it right side out. Okay, once you turn it out, we're going to give it a good press. Okay, so once you turn it around and gave it a good press, we're going to attach it to our bottom fronts. So we're right sides facing. We're just going to pin this in place and pin at your notches first. Alright, so head over to the machine and we're going to stitch using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way across. Okay, so once you attach the bib, you want to press your seams up, and then you want to make sure the corners are tucked in, and we're going to pin this from the front and top stitch it. Okay, so once you pin across the front like this, we're going to top stitch close to the seam all the way across. Okay, so once we top stitch across the front, encasing the bottom, we're going to put it to the side just a second, and we're going to put together our bib pocket. So we're right sides facing. We're going to stitch using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way around, leaving about a 2-inch opening so we can turn it around. Okay, so we're going to trim our corners a little bit. So once you trim, we're going to turn it right side out. Okay, so once you turn the right side out, you're going to give it a good press, and then you're going to edge stitch it with top stitching all the way up from the bottom to the top, and then a 1/4 inch inside of that, you're going to top stitch another row. And you're going to do that for both sides, and you don't have to slip stitch this because the top stitch is going to close it out automatically. Okay, so once you do your 2 rows of top stitching on both sides, you're going to do 2 more where your stitching line is right here in the center, and then also your buttonholes on the side. So after that, we can attach it to the bib. So find your markings and put it in place. And we're going to do a top stitching row along the top, and then another one underneath a 1/4 inch away. And then at the bottom, we're going to do the same thing. Top stitch on the edge of the bottom, and then a second row a 1/4 away from that one. And then after that, we're going to do a top stitching row down the center, and then to the right of that, we're going to do one more a 1/4 inch away from that. Okay, after we top stitch 2 rows on the top and also on the bottom, and then again in the center, you want to top stitch 1 1/8 away from the first stitching line all the way across the bottom, and then 1 1/4 inches away from the top, you're going to stitch all the way across. Now that we have all of our top stitching done to the bib, we're going to move along to our back pieces. Okay, so we're right sides facing. You're going to pin your back pieces together, and you're going to start at your notches. You should have 3 indicating that we're at the back. We're also going to pin at the dot. Okay, so we're going to head to the sewing machine, and we're going to start at the dot using 5/8 of an inseam allowance all the way down around the curve and at the crotch. So after you stitch your backs together, it's also optional to do another stitching just to secure it. And then you want to do some clipping into your curve. Be sure not to clip into your stitch line. Okay, so after we do that, you want to press your seams open, and then we're going to attach our suspenders. Okay, so you just grab one of them, make sure the notches match up. If the notch don't match up, you're clearly on the wrong piece. So pin at your notch first. Okay, so once you have both pieces pinned down, you want to stitch 5/8 of an inch all the way across both sides. Okay, so once you stitch your suspenders onto your back and press the seams, you want to take this and put it aside just for just a second. And you want to grab your back pocket pieces, which are pattern pieces number 18, and we're right sides facing. You want to pin. So we're going to stitch along the long side, 5/8 of an inch, and then pivot, and then across the bottom, and then we're going to do 5/8 of an inch along this side here. Do that and come back. Okay, so once you stitch them together, we're going to clip into our corners. And now let's turn this right side out. Okay, so once you turn it right side out, you want to give it a really good press and find your stitching line and top stitch it across, and then below it you want to do another top stitching row a 1/4 inch away from the first one. So after you do your 2 top stitching rows, we're going to attach this to your left back. Okay, so after you do your 2 top stitching rows, you want to take this and attach it to your left back. So just place it where your markings are, just like this, and pin it. So after you have it pinned, we're going to top stitch it along the edge, along the side, and then across the bottom, and then we're going to do another top stitching row 1/4 of an inch away along the side and then across the bottom, and then you're going to baste this end right here closed. Okay, so after we top stitched our back pocket on, as you see right here, we're going to take your other back pocket and finish it just like we did the front, and place it. Make sure that you're covering up the tip of this one, and once you place it and pin it down, we're going to top stitch it along the edge all the way around, and then we're going to do a second row of top stitching 1/4 of an inch away all the way around, just like I did on this pocket here. Okay, so after you attach your pockets, you want to place this aside for just a minute, and you want to grab one of your back facings and your suspenders, and with right sides facing, we're going to attach them at the notches right here and pin. Okay, so once you have both of your suspenders attached to your back, you're going to stitch across the top using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so after you stitch them together, you want to press your seams open, and also on this curved part right here in the center, you want to press it in 1/4 of an inch and then stitch it down on the other side, not top stitching, just a regular stitch. Okay, so now we're going to take this piece and we're going to attach it to the back. So just match it up and pin. Pin at your seams. Also pin at your notches. Okay, so once you have it all pinned, we're going to start here, stitch up around the curve, all the way up to the corner, and then across, and then all the way down, finishing up at the dot right here. And we're going to be using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so once we have both attached, we're going to clip into our corners. We're also going to clip into both of the curves. And then we're going to turn this right side out. Okay, so once you turn it right side out and point out your corners, and here too, you want to give it a really good press, and then we're going to do 2 rows of top stitching, one at the very edge all the way around here and also here, and then a second one 1/4 inch away following the first one all the way around and ending here. Okay, so after you top stitch those suspenders, you want to take your left one and place it over your right, just like this, and we're going to top stitch 2 rows here and also at the top to close it out. Okay, now that we have our suspenders attached to each other, we're going to attach the side seams with the right side spacing. So I'm going to grab my front and lay it across my back. So I grab my side tabs first with right side spacing. I'm going to pin there. Then we'll continue pinning down the side. I'm going to pin the other side seam the exact same way, and I'm going to stitch across here, pivot, and then stitch all the way down to the hem. And then once I get done, I'm going to serge both sides. Okay, now that we attached our front and back at the side seams, the only other top stitching we have is down the side seams and around the bib. Then add your buttonholes and your heart goods. After that, you want to pin and sew your inseam and then finish your hem. Once you do that, give it a good press and you're all done. Okay, you're all done. Thanks for watching. See you next time.